We are on Mem Gimel Amud Aleph 43a at the Gemara toward the bottom of the page. So yesterday we learned about the three exceptions: those who don't have to go to battle, someone who built a vineyard, someone who planted a vineyard, which doesn't really mean a vineyard; it could also mean 3 trees. Someone who built a house, it doesn't mean specifically you built it; it could be if you bought it or you inherited a house, that would also suffice. And somebody who is marrying a woman. Again, any type of marriage is acceptable, except if the marriage is prohibited or it's machzer grushosai. In other words, he's marrying the woman he previously divorced. Okay. Now, if it's the first year where he's actually benefiting from it. In other words, he moved into the house, he married the woman, and this is the year where he can finally eat the fruits of his vineyard or his orchard. So in that case, he doesn't even sort of join the logistic support. He just stays home. Otherwise, if he hasn't yet derived the benefits, then he joins logistics. We learned V'dibru ha'shaitrim. We're at the Gemara. Yochel dvorim shel atzman. You'd think that the shaitrim, these are the second to top rank. So you have the Kayim Mashuach, which would be the equivalent to the 5-star general, and the shaitrim, these are the 1-star generals or the colonels, etc., captains. Okay, so V'dibru ha'shaitrim Yochel dvorim shel atzman. You'd think that it's the things that they're saying are the things of their own ideas. One second. You would think that they're speaking of their own accord. In other words, they're the ones giving the speech. When it says v'yosfu hashoitrim, and the shoitrim continue to speak, so evidently we'll soon see here the conversation that happens. These announcements take place between 3 people, or 2 people really. It's the Kohanim and the Shaitrim. But the question is, are the Shaitrim saying their own? Are they speaking of their own accord, or are they repeating what the Kohen says? So when it says v'dibur ha'shaitrim, the Shaitrim speak, they're actually repeating what the Kohen Mashuach says. We'll explain this in a moment. Okay, how does this work? Kohen medaber v'shaitrim mashmiya. The Kohen Mashuach, the 5-star general, speaks, and the Shaitrim, the colonels, they repeat what he said. Okay. So we'll explain now in a moment. Tani Chado, one of the Brisa says, Kohen Medaber, the Kohen Mashuach, the general, speaks, the Shaitrim Mashmiya, and the colonels, they repeat what he says. The Tanya Idach, another Brisa says, Kohen Medaber, the Kohen Mashmiya. The Kohen is the one who speaks, and the Kohen is the one who lets everyone has to hear him. So he has to speak very, very loudly. The Tanya Idach, and a third Brisa says, Shaitrim Medaber v'Shaitrim Mashmiya. The captains, they're the ones who speak, and they're the ones who make sure everyone hears what they're saying. Okay, so now which is it? Is it the Kohen? Is it the Shaiter? Or is it the Kohen who speaks and the Shaiter lets everyone hear what he says? So Amar Abaye says as follows. Okay, so there were three components to the announcement. Component number 1 is the pep talk. That's what we saw yesterday. The pep talk basically is God is with you. They're coming in the image of Goliath and Shaivach, and you are coming in the image of you're coming with God Himself, and God will save you and protect you. And don't be scared and don't be concerned, etc. Be brave. That's the first component. So that component, the Kohen says it, and he has to say it loud enough that everybody can hear. Component number 2 are the exemptions, and these are who built a house, who started a vineyard or an orchard, and who is married or engaged to a woman. So those 3 categories, those are those 3 categories are spoken by the Kohen, and they're repeated by the Shaiter, the lieutenant, the captain, whatever. And finally is v'yosva shaychim. The shaychim continue and they say, what do they say? There's the big exception, which we'll see twice today. It's the famous opinion of Rabbi Yehudah. Mia ish hayare v'rach halevav. Who is the man who is yare? He's scared. V'rach halevav, and his heart is weak. What does that mean? According to sincere Rabbi Yehudah, it could be. It means very simply. It means he just doesn't have a heart that's able to go out to battle. But the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah is that it refers to somebody who has sinned, and we'll discuss that more today. So that last part, who is the man who sinned, that is spoken and announced specifically by the shaiter, by the captains, not by the general. Okay, so let's see. Amar Abayo, Hakeitzad me v'nigash ad v'dibru. From the words v'nigash ad v'dibru, that's the pep talk. God is with you, basically, and they're coming with these illusory powers. So that's v'dibru kai medaber v'kai mashmiah. The Kayan speaks, and the Kayan, everybody has to hear him. Mevidibru ad v'yisvu, the three exemptions. Kayan medaber v'sharter mashmiah. The Kayan speaks it, and the shaiter repeats it. Meviyasav elach sharter medaber v'sharter mashmiah. From the last category, which is who's the man who's weak, whose heart is weak, the captain speaks it, and the captain repeats it. Okay. 5 lines in the bottom of the page. Second word on the line. Mia ish sharbana bayis chadash. Who is someone who built a new house? So Gemara will explain all the types of houses that qualify. Tonar Rabbanan. Asharbana, he builds the house. Ainli el asharbana. You would think that he actually has to build a house. Lokach, let's say he purchased a house, or v'yarash, he inherited a house. V'nitin loy matana, or he was given the house as a gift. Minai, and how do we know that is included? Hamad loymer mia ish sharbana bayis. Okay, in other words, Miha Ish, who is the man, implies that it's more than just building the house. Any person who has something, an event similar to building a house, he is included. Okay, Eli Elabayas. This specifically means a house. Minayel Rabbi is based at Teven. A house of Teven is grain. Ubesa Bakar, a barn. Ubesa Eitzem, this is a house to hold wood. Ubesa Eitzer is a house to hold a large pantry to hold food stores. Anyone who builds, any type of construction, even if it's not exactly a house that's used for living. You'd think that this includes anyone who builds a watchman's house at the entrance at the gate of his property. That's the base sha'ar. Achsadra umerpeset are different types of porches. Achsadra is more like they call it an awning, and like an awning, sort of like a wraparound porch. I don't know what that means. Yeah, okay. Achsadra is more like a wraparound porch. It's sort of where you extend an awning over some pillars that around the house. Merpeset is the out. So achsadra is used underneath. You use an achsadra underneath it, right? You stand underneath the awning. Merpeset is the opposite. It's a porch. You go on top of it. So you're looking at a second floor structure or something like that, or a structure that's used to step on. So these things, Talmud are bias. They have to be similar to a house. Ma bias royal dir. It has to be something that theoretically you can use to live in. Afkol royal dir is something that you can use. Presumably, the guard's house is so narrow that he can't take a nap. It's too small to lay down and take a nap. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, bias kamashmai. He makes it very simple. He says, a house means a house. And if you build a house, you build a barn or you build a storehouse, it does not count. Okay. It says, Veloy chanochai. Someone who he hasn't yet. Chinuch here means to sort of initiation, or to chinuch, like for example, chinuch of children is to initiate them in being well-regulated people, well-regulated children, and then eventually adults. Chinuch over here means to initiate the use of the house. So it says v'loy chanocha. He hasn't yet initiated the use of the house. Now, the word chanocha is plural. Give me a moment here. it's plural. It could have been. It could have said singular that he hasn't yet. We're talking about mi ish shabana bayis v'lo chanach. He didn't initiate. What's chanachai plural? Prat legazlan. Okay, chanachai means this type of initiation is valid, but there are types of initiation that aren't valid. What's an example of an initiation that isn't valid? That is a robber. Now hold the obvious question here. In combat units. I'm sorry. If somebody begins using a house, they do not participate in anything. If they built a house but did not yet begin using it, then they participate in logistics, but not in combat. But if they stole a house, then they're regular military service. Okay, the Gemara says, "Lema deloy Rabbi Seglili." This seems to imply not like the opinion of Rabbi Seglili. Rabbi Seglili, what does Rabbi Seglili teach us? Ha'amar, he says, "V'rach halevov," someone who has a weak heart. What? So, like we just mentioned, the last group of people that go back and do not participate in combat units are those with Yorev v'rach halevov. Men who are scared and have weak hearts. What exactly does that mean? Basically, it says Zeha Misyare. We're turning the page now on top of Gimel Amud Beis 43b. This is someone who's scared of the sins in his hands. Now, hold on a second. If you tell me he's a thief, so obviously he should be concerned that he sins. So why? So either way, he shouldn't be going to battle because he's a thief, and a thief doesn't belong in battle. He should go back so that he doesn't weaken the hearts of those that go with him. We don't want sinners on the battlefield. So therefore, why do I need a pasuk to tell me that a thief is excluded from going out to combat? I already know he's excluded because it says he's excluded under the category of sinners. Okay. So the Gemara says, "I feel time Rabbi Seglili." It could even be the opinion of Rabbi Seglili. He going to Avatshuva. It's talking about a scenario where he's repented. V'yahav dami, and he's paid for the house. Okay. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. If he's paid for the house, so what is that? What happens now? Then he's a buyer, and a buyer is indeed excluded from the house. So the Gemara says, he should not be sent to combat units. So the Gemara says, since initially he's taken the house by robbery, so therefore he is therefore he's not exempt from going out to battle. Okay, next Gemara. Someone who plants a vineyard. And the Gemara will explain it doesn't necessarily just mean planting, it doesn't necessarily just mean a vineyard. Tanarbon, Ashernota, someone who plants. Nota means to plant. Ainli elanota. So here we see that you have to plant. We're on the 6th line of 43b. Lokach, if he purchased the yarash or he inherited v'nidnelev matana or was given as a gift, mina, and how do we know that those people also have to go back, are sent back from the battlefield? Talmud Laimar umiya ish ashanota. Who is the man who planted? So miya ish is sort of an expansive category. Anyone who is in a similar category to planting is also included. Karam, a vineyard. Ainli ela karam, specifically a vineyard. A vineyard obviously grows grapes. Minay l'rav is chamisha ilani ma'achal. Okay, so let's just pause here for a moment. Just make 2 points about vineyards. Just give me a moment here. Okay, first point will go as follows. There's a Torah prohibition of klayim. Klayim is mixing certain things. What's an example of klayim? There are really 3 categories of klayim. One of them is mixing wool and linen in a garment. That type of klayim is called shatnez. Another type of klayim is called kloy behema, which is, for example, plowing the field with a bull and a donkey hooked to the same plow. And the third type of plow is klai zrom. Klai zrom refers to grafting plants. There's other types of klai, which would also be the prohibition to create a mule by putting a sire on top of an ass, something like that. Okay, now in grafting let's say grafting klai zrom, this I don't know exactly specific words that are right here. The mixing of plants. The most restrictive category is a category called klai hakerem. Klai hakerem means things that have violated this principle of mixing that pertain to a vineyard. For example, if you have a potato field that encroaches on your vineyard without the proper separation, then the potato field becomes prohibited. Now, this is more strict. The rules are far stricter when it comes to a vineyard than it comes, let's say, for example, to a potato field growing next to a wheat harvest, or a potato field growing next to tomatoes. Okay, that's the first point. The second point I want to make is, so now how do you define a vineyard? Right, we're saying here this idea of klai hakerem. These things of mixing other plants next to a vineyard. What is a vineyard? In other words, is one plant a vineyard? We're not saying it's to a geffen, to a single plant. We're saying it's next to a vineyard. What's a vineyard? So a vineyard is two rows of two. So you have a unit. If you want to look, the previous page is a picture of it. Gimel and Aleph in the original print. You have that little diagram. You see it? Basically looking at two and two, and then a tail coming out. So it's 5 plants. That is the minimum halachic definition of vineyard. Okay, so let's continue now. Back on Gimel and Beis. Okay, we are about 8 lines down. First one line is Ainli ela kerem minay l'rabis chamish iloni ma'achla. Okay, so I know that if he plants a vineyard, he goes back. What about if there are five trees, 5 fruit trees? Vafilu mishar minim, even if the fruit trees are all different. Talmud loymar asher nota, that he planted. In other words, any type of planting. Maybe I think that I'd include also if it were just 4 trees instead of 5 trees. Again, where does number 5 come from? The minimum of a vineyard. A vineyard is 5 trees, and it's also productive. A vineyard produces fruits.
Vineyard is 5.
5 vines. 5 vines. Sorry.
Okay, the question is what it constitutes a vine? How long does it have to be? Does that be a certain length or a certain maturity to be counted at?
What size is the vine?
Yeah, people talk about vines. What counts as a vine?
Yeah, it's a good question. I believe it's a minimal amount, so it doesn't have to be very high. No. We'll soon see a certain type of vine that grows just this high. I don't know how productive it is, but what it's yielding, but apparently it's a thing. So it doesn't have to be very big. Yeah. Okay. So what happens if somebody planted 4 ilani ma'achal, 4 fruit trees, or chamish ilani srak, or 5 trees that are barren? These could be, trees like maples and cedars, or they could be trees, the male version of a tree. So, for example, there are male and female palm trees. The female trees bear fruit, the males don't. That type of male tree would also suffice. Okay.
What are those for trans trees, Rabbi? That was common. You're revealing your transgender bias. We're going to file a complaint with the city about this.
Talmud Loimar Kerem. So the verse says a vineyard. In other words, it has to be at least similar to a vineyard, which is 5 trees, and they have to be fruit bearing. Rabbi Eliezer and Yaakov says, Kerem kimashmoi. a vineyard as it is, i.e., a vineyard. It means a vineyard. It doesn't mean an orchard. Okay, again, same problem here. Lo chilal v'lo chilalei. The verse reads, wait a moment. V'lo chilalei. He did not yet initiate it. He hasn't yet benefited. Okay, meaning that it seems to be that there is some type of initiation that isn't included. What does that mean? So something that's excluded from the category of what he goes back, what he turns back from the battlefield for. So Gemara says prat lemavrach ulemarkiv. This excludes somebody who is mavrach or markiv. What's mavrach? Mavrach is a lot of plants, a lot of trees and other plants, many plants. They grow what they call runners. And it's sort of the idea of, I don't know what the exact scientific word for it is. The idea of a runner is sort of they grow these low-hanging branches, and if you cover it with soil, those branches will actually turn into a new plant. Very common with ground cover. So like strawberry plants grow runners, and a lot of the ground cover plants, they spread by putting out runners. So mavrach is that idea where basically you take a branch and you put it in you a low-hanging branch, you force it down toward the ground and cover it with soil in the hopes that it will grow a new plant. That's mavrach. Markiv is grafting. So that would be, let's say, grafting a female into a male, or even a female into a female, where you take a strong, sturdy tree, you cut off a branch, you make a hole in it, pointy hole, and then you take another branch and make a pointy end to it, stick it in and tie it together and hold it until it eventually grows into one.
People try to do that to people these days. Unbelievable.
So that's mavrach and markiv, and that's excluded. If you do that, you do not turn back from the battlefield. So ask the Gemara, hold on. But then didn't we learn our Mishnah clearly says the otherwise. Our Mishnah says that for mavrach and markiv, you do go back. You don't need to go to battle. You're given an exemption, a deferment, as it were. Amar Zero of Zero says the name of Chizda. Loy kasha, it's not difficult. Kan bar kavas iser, kan bar kavas heter. It depends how the grafting was done. If the grafting was prohibited, meaning you grafted two different varieties, that's prohibited. So then you don't go back. Hai bar kavas heter, you did the same variety, that is permitted. Tomorrow we'll try to give a number of explanations in how to answer this question. So Gemara says, Hai bar kavas heter hechidami. How exactly did you do this grafting that was permissible? Perhaps what you did was you grafted a young tree onto a young tree. So Gemara says, typically the boy matter mishum yolada. If we talk about a young tree, what do we mean a young tree? We're talking about a tree that still qualifies for arla. So you can't even eat the fruits. So you grafted a young tree into a young tree. Well, the reason why you go back from war is because of the first young tree. Because if you haven't yet benefited from the tree, you planted a tree, but you haven't waited the 3 years. Okay, Elowat, Yeloda Bizkena. We're talking about a young tree onto a mature tree. Va'amar Ravu says, Yola Shesifcha Bizkena, Botla Yolda Bizkena, Ve'em Badin Arla. If you have an old mature tree and you graft a young productive branch onto it, so what happens is that the young branch is bottle, it's nullified, and we consider the tree to be a mature tree. And if it is a mature tree, then the halacha is that as a mature tree, it's already past the years of Arla. So there, about halfway down, first one line is Amar of Yirmiyah. Yirmiyah is the first one, 43b. Yeah. The Ema din Arla. Okay, so if therefore, in other words, in which scenario would you go back from the battlefield because you grafted a branch on? If you grafted it onto a mature tree, you should not be going back because you don't restart the Arla counts. If you grafted it onto an immature tree, well, the immature tree is enough of a reason to go back. So we're talking about a young tree and a young tree. Okay, it's an interesting rule here. he planted the tree for a fence or for beams. What does this mean? So let's say a guy has a hole in the property fence. So he plants a tree there to fill the hole. So it could be it's a fruit tree, but the reason why he's planting the tree is literally so that it fills in his fence, and not that he should enjoy the fruits of the tree. Alternatively, he wanted they call it olive woods or apple woods, right? He's a big in demand. The smokers love they love apple woods. And olive wood is apparently the artists love olive woods. It's prettier or something. Anyway, so he's planting a fruit tree for the wood of it. So in these cases, down in Talis, he's exempt from the laws of Arla. Okay, and that's why the first tree he wouldn't go back for, because he planted it not to eat the fruits, but to get the wood. But the second tree, but once he grafts onto it, then he has to, then he's able to go back for more. So the Gemara says, "Ma'ishna yelod Ma'ishna yelod b'zkeina the botla, Ma'ishna yelod b'yelod the loy botla." So Gemara asks an obvious question. Hold on a second. If he grafts a young tree onto an old tree, so then the old tree is considered primary and the young tree secondary, and it's bottle, it's nullified, and he does not return from battle because of it. So why isn't the same thing true of a young tree? So he plants this immature tree to fill in his fence. Okay, then a year later he decides, you know what, might as well grow lemons on it. So he throws a lemon branch on it, and he it's in the hopes that it'll give a decent lemon yield. Right, as it says, take lemons and make lemonade. Anyway, but why isn't it bottled to the old tree? Okay, so the Gemara, I'll just speak it out outside, before we see inside the text. The answer is very simple. The answer is because we have this interesting law. If you plant a fruit tree with the intention of either using it to fill in your fence or for the woods, and then within 3 years you change your mind. You know what, it's a cool tree, maybe I'll just save myself the early time, we'll use it to eat. The halacha is that you have to wait 3 years. So that's exactly what happens here. By you took, let's say, a male palm tree or a male lemon. I don't know if there's thing as a male lemon tree, but you took a male fruit tree, you grafted on female branches. Now what are you doing? You're saying that, hold on, I want the fruit of this tree. Mm-hmm. If you want the fruit of the tree, then you have to wait 3 years, and therefore it's not bottled. And therefore you do get to go back from the battlefield. Hasam, by an older tree, if you graft a young branch onto a young tree, you are given a battlefield deferment. Whereas if you graft a young branch onto a mature tree, you do not get a battlefield deferment. And the reason for that is because the young branch is bottled, it's nullified by the mature tree. The Gemara says, Hasam in the scenario of grafting a young branch onto an old tree, once you've done it, you've done it. However, with a tree that was planted for its woods, if he changes his mind, then he would have to wait. He would have to wait the full years of Arla. Just like if a tree grew on its own, it's not Arla. If a tree grows on its own, a wild tree, and you decide to use its fruits, then you have to wait 3 years until it's 3 years old. And similarly, even though there's an exception for a tree that was planted for a beam, for its wood or to be used as a fence, but that exception does not apply once you change your mind. Okay, the Gemara has an obvious solution. If a lukma b'kerem shel shnei shutfin, why can't it be a scenario where there were two partners? So basically, each one. The Gemara's question was: if you grafted a young tree onto a young tree, why don't you go back because of the first young tree? Well, the reason is because I don't own the first young tree, because it's my partner's tree. So that's why I would go back because of the second tree. Because my tree was a male tree, let's say, was not fruit bearing. Now that I grafted onto it a young branch, it will start to bear fruit. This is an obvious solution. A vineyard that's owned by two partners, you do not go back. You are not given a battlefield deferment. Yomar asks, hold on a second. Okay, so I'll just point out here, in terms of people dying on the battlefields, we spoke about this in Yevamos, the event of the Dakar submarine, where many married men disappeared, and they ended up being agunas. And the Dakar submarine was discovered 35 years after it sunk, something like that.
Submarine, right?
The Dakar submarine, yeah. If you, matter of fact, the sail of the Dakar is on display in Haifa by the Maritime Museum. I've been there, I've seen it. They brought up just the sail in the bottom of the Mediterranean. Anyway, it took a while to figure out a halachic leniency to permit the agunas. Regardless, in the battles of King David, anyone who went to battle would write a divorce to their wife on condition. So if they disappear, or so that she should not be eligible for Yibum. So if they disappear, then the divorce is retroactively valid, and therefore she's not eligible for Yibum. However, it is possible for, if this did not happen, then she would be eligible for Yibum. You have five brothers. One of them dies in battle without children. All four brothers now are eligible Yivamin, potentially Yivamin. The halacha is all of them go back from battle. Hold on, only one of them can marry her. So why is it different than a vineyard owned by two partners? Why is a vineyard different from five brothers? One of them dies without children. The Kollel and Chayzrim, they all go back from battle. So the Gemara says no. Each one of them could theoretically be a full-fledged. She could be his full-fledged wife. However, in the case of a partnership, there is no in every tree there is no individual identity. This belongs to one of the partners, and therefore partners are not given a battlefield exemption. We're talking about someone who grafts a tree onto a vegetable plant. Now, typically that's prohibited. However, V'hai Tana, who it's this opinion, the Tanya we learned, Mavrach Ilan B'Yark, Rav Shimon Gamliel Mater. Rav Shimon Gamliel says you are allowed to graft a fruit tree onto a vegetable. Mishum Rabbi Yehudah ben Gamda Ishkfar Akai, in the name of Rabbi Yehudah bar Gamda from the city of Akko, and V'chachamim, the rabbi's opinion. This is the mainstream opinion. Oisrin, it's prohibited. Okay, but that would be an option if you grafted a fruit tree onto a vegetable. I don't know how exactly that would work, but that would be a solution. That would be a way where you'd be given an exemption. You wouldn't get an exemption for a vegetable, but you would get an exemption for grafting the fruit tree on. Rav Dimi says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Hamani, whose opinion is this? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. The opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Did Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov not say that a kerem, a vineyard, means a vineyard? Doesn't mean anything else. Doesn't mean 5 fruit trees. So hachanami nota planting kimashmoi. It means what it means. It means to plant a vineyard. Nota in planting, yes. Mavrak u'marak loy, but growing additional shoots off the original plant and grafting is not included. Rav Dimi said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Yolda Pchusa mitefach chayav. Okay, so these are just a bunch of statements from Rav Dimi in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. 43. Okay, let's start here. Yolda Pchusa mitefach. If you have a tree that's shorter than a tefach, this is a very small vine. Obviously, it's this high. One hand's breadth high. Chayeves ba'arla kol shneisel. Rabbinically, it's always under the rules of arla. Why? Because it always looks like it's a plant that's half a year old. The meschazi kibas shata, because it looks like it's 1 year old. But when is this true? If it's a very small vineyard, the smallest type. There are just 5 vines in the vineyard. Alvakula karam, but if it's a large vineyard and he plants these very small plants, then kala isla, everybody knows that it's already 3 years old and therefore you're allowed to eat it. Yasser Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yechon. Rav Dimi came and said in the name of Rabbi Yechon, Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, Meis Taifas Arba Amas L'Kriyah Shema. It is prohibited for someone to say recite Kriyah Shema within 4 cubits of a dead body. Why is this? Because Shenemar Loig LaRosh Cherav Eiseo. It's sort of mocking the dead person, because a living person is able to recognize Hashem by saying Shema, and a dead person can't. And therefore, it's insulting. Amar Yitzchak Amar Rabbi Yechon. Yitzchak says the name of Rabbi Yechon, Mishum Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the name of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Chur Gisah Hagdela ben Achim. This is a stepsister. So these kids, their parents married each other, but they have no direct, there's no blood relationship. So the 2 people married each other, right? The father has kids from his previous marriage. Let's say he has sons, or it could be the opposite. And the woman has daughters, or the opposite. Okay. So these kids have they're step siblings. They're not half. There's no blood relationship. Mm-hmm. So if you have a stepsister that grows up amongst a bunch of brothers, she may not marry the brothers, because it looks like they're marrying their sister. And the Gemara says, but that's not the halacha. She may marry her stepbrother, because Kollel Islay Milsa, there are rumors. Everybody knows, sort of the gossip in town is everybody knows that they're step siblings, and therefore there's no concern that people will think they're allowed to marry a sister. Amar Rav Yitzchak, Amar Rav Yechanan. Rav Yitzchak said is in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Mishum Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Leket Shiklu Peah Sha'asan Begoren. Leket Shiklu and Peah that were made, that were brought to a storehouse. In other words, this was a poor man, but he was a very successful poor man. He would go around collecting Leket Shiklu and Peah, but he was so successful, he ended up getting a huge pile worth of grain. So now what the problem is, it looks like he has his own field, and it looks like that he harvested his own fields. Mm-hmm. So then hukbu l'maiser, we require him to take off maiser because of this confusion that it looks like he's grown a field. So Amar Ula says, hold on a second, this is only true if this is on a field. So he has a field, the poor man. Obviously, it's not productive, it's not yielding a lot, and then he collects all this grain, and he seems to be doing very well for himself. Then he needs to take off trumas and maisers. However, but if it's in the city, Kollel say the most, so that everybody knows that he's just a successful schnorrer, right? It's not like what?
No, just.
It's not like he knows. It's not like that he has a field that people will think that maybe he grew a field because it's in a city and nobody has fields in the city. Amar Yitzchak Amar Rabbi Yechon. Yitzchak says the name of Rabbi Yechon. Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Yolda pchusa mitefach ein mekadesh says rom. Okay, if you have a very small growth, one tefach, it does not prohibit other plants. Again, we learned about this idea called klai hakaram. It's a mixture. You have potatoes growing next to these very short vines, just 1 hand's breadth tall. So it does not prohibit the potatoes. When is this true? If the entire vineyard is a very small vineyard, it's just 5 plants. Avakula karam, but if it's a large vineyard, so then makdish, then it prohibits. Okay. Now just a point here from Rashi, very important point. And then I think we'll stop there. A very important point from Rashi. Hold on a second. If klai hakaram is biblical, then how in the world? So who cares what the size of the plant is? It should still be prohibited. So Rashi explains there is a minority opinion that says that klai zrom, a klai hakaram, is specifically with 2 types of vegetables, onions and another one called canvas. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe the article tells you what canvas is. So therefore, because potatoes are rabbinical in nature, the rabbi said that if the vines are 1 tefach small, just 1 hand's breadth tall, then they will not prohibit. They will not prohibit the potatoes, only full-grown plants, because in this opinion, basically the concept of klai hakaram, of mixing other plants with the vineyard, only pertains to 2 specific species. Other species are not included. Since it's rabbinical, the rabbis were able to be lenient, Okay, we'll stop there. Okay. Yeah, we didn't even do a full blot today. So, it's interesting. If you look at Rashi, you could tell that it's not so easy. Rashi's on both sides of the page.